Hello, my name's Arrow. I go by they, them pronouns, and this is a part 2 of my World Mental Health Day little videos. And so I wanted to talk about my experiences with therapy. So therapy has been probably the most important thing in my recovery. For sure, yeah. And part of that is because talking about my issues was like the most it was like the second most impossible thing in my brain at the time. It was like getting better and then talking about my issues was the second thing. So the fact that I did that and the fact that I talked to someone gave me a lot of hope because I'd done something impossible. But yeah, it's also just been really helpful because it's given me the ability to talk to someone who's not a part of my life, whose opinions and actions doesn't need to have an effect on my life. And also the therapists that I've talked to have been great, and they haven't really made me feel like they have necessarily much of an opinion. And that's helpful, and it's also was helpful for me to not feel like a burden when talking to them, because I'm like, they have heard much worse things, or they've heard the same bad stuff, or even like, I'm not the only person today who's going to be talking about suicide to them, probably. So, I mean, I don't know that, but like, that's been helpful because it's made me feel like I'm not talking about something too heavy, or I'm not going to bring them down because this is their job. So that's been part of it, why therapy's been great. And then also they've just been able to guide me into ways to help myself. I've never seen therapy as something that's necessarily directly helping me. It's always been something that's been a tool for me to use to help myself. And I find that perspective important because it makes me feel like I am taking back that power and I'm in more control because I'm doing the action of healing to myself. And then therapy is just a way to do that. So I've been in therapy for about 3.5 years. Yeah, I first started going to therapy because I was just like, my last option. I was like, hey, I'll do it just so I say I've done it, and then I'll kill myself because I've run out of options. So, yeah, like an ultimatum sort of thing. And then I'll wait 2 weeks, and if things don't change, then I have permission. So, that was originally why. But then I had the whole feeling of done something impossible, a little bit of hope, and then I was like, well, I'm gonna hold on to this with all I've got. So, but yeah, I originally tried to get therapy through a pediatrician who I was seeing for really bad migraines and dizzy spells I was having at the time. She had an assistant who I felt comfortable talking to a bit. Nothing ended up coming out of that. My mom informed me that she thinks there was a diagnosis that happened then, but I hadn't really heard much about that, and I don't really know. But yeah, basically nothing came of that. And then my mom didn't necessarily know how much I was struggling or exactly what with, but she knew I was struggling with anxiety at the time. So but I really didn't feel comfortable talking to anyone about the fact that I wanted help. I ended up going through a counselor, though. I saw a student success teacher at my school who referred me to a counselor who was at my school as well, who I would meet with during one of my classes once a week. And I could kind of choose which class, and then I would miss the class and go to this session. They'd call me down, and I'd like alternate kind of classes, and yeah, and it was hard for sure, but it also helped because I would feel like exhausted and like awful after, like, during it, like, because I was dealing with things that I've been repressing. And one of the things I remember saying to her is that, like, she's like, okay, what are some of the bad thoughts in your head? And I was like, well, most of the time I don't have any thoughts, like, ever. Like, I don't really think. I just feel awful. And that was because I was just not paying attention to the thoughts. I was repressing them. I was ignoring them. And I needed to, so through therapy, I was able to acknowledge what I was thinking, figure out what that was, and then work through thinking of why it's illogical and positive responses to it and what to do about it, if anything. And so I was doing that and doing different cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, stuff like that. And like occasionally I had worksheets and stuff, but mostly it was just a very verbal thing because that's what I preferred. It was also focusing on taking care of myself physically. I was really not taking care of myself well physically, so making sure I was eating properly, or at least like 3 meals a day with like decent nutrition, and getting enough sleep, like at least 6 hours, but preferably like more than that, and at regular hours. Like I've really affected, like even if I get 10 hours of sleep, but I go to bed at 3 o'clock, like 3 a.m., that will make me feel awful, and I kind of started to realize that effect. And then the other thing I kind of focused on in the beginning was also just changing my perspective around things. Like, I didn't feel like I could have any like emotions or any like feelings about things, but I kind of realized I really took it down to a simple level. So like, I am, I like this because it like, oh, oh, this water bottle. I like this water bottle this color than if it were like a, a yellow. That's a feeling. Wow. Um, and just really basic, and then kind of building on that and doing more things that I used to enjoy, even if I didn't feel like I enjoyed them then. And still doing things even though I didn't get anything out of it. Because eventually I would. Like going to socialize, like I would be like, oh, I'm not gonna like this. Then I'd be like, it's okay. Like it's not horrible. And the more I started to do those things, the better I started to feel, and the more I started to actually enjoy things. But it was still very muted, and also my brain was still very chaotic. And I really had to work through a lot of stuff. And also therapy in the beginning was, because a lot of it was acknowledging how I was feeling, and really thinking about that. It was also how I realized that I was queer. And I could talk more about that too, but there's a whole thing with that. I meant to meet with her like earlier in the year. I ended up meeting her in February, but the end of December is actually when I started to seek out counseling in my school. It's just there was a really long waiting for everything, which is, I think, an issue that a lot of people face. But it was also like holiday break in December, and then in the beginning of January it just didn't really happen until the beginning of February. So I did that therapy for a few months, and then it was summer break. So then there was 2 months there where I didn't have any help, and so that was really hard, and things got worse again. But I felt more equipped to deal with them. So although things were worse, I'd say I was better off than when I started therapy. Before I started therapy, but it was really hard, and a lot of shit happened in my life. But anyways, I ended up going back to school, and took me a little bit of time to ask for help again, because I'm like, why is she not contacting me? Like I thought she was going to and stuff. But I ended up reaching out again. So I ended up meeting with her. It was the beginning of my grade 10 year in high school. So I was in seeing her, and it kind of went to every other week kind of thing. And then towards the end of the year, I don't remember what time exactly, it was somewhere time in the fall, I think, or sorry, in the spring, I think. And I started to meet with another therapist who was not through the school, who was separate. It was still all free because in Ontario you can get free counselling when you're under the age of 18. So like you're legally entitled to access to counseling. Anyways, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that's a thing. Anyway, so I was seeing this counselor and like this therapist, and mostly at that point I was just doing talk therapy. So I was just realizing like I would critically think through everything, and sometimes I just need to verbalize that for me to hear myself. But sometimes, you know, I'd get called out like, doesn't that seem a little harsh? And then I'd be like, oh yeah, I am being really hard on myself. What a surprise. But yeah, so I started to see a different counselor who was really wonderful. So I met in her office every week and went and did that through the summer, and then kept doing that all of grade, like since then pretty much. I did that all of grade through summer and all of grade 11. Occasionally it would be like every other week or every 3 weeks, but sometimes it would be every week, just depending on how I was doing and the availability of what was going on. And then in grade 12, that therapist at the time had to go on a leave, and so I ended up going back to the counselor at the school for some time in grade 12. And yeah, so I saw her for some time, and then eventually I went back again to the one who had been taking the leave. So I'd switched back and forth a couple times, but it was only to the two counselors. And also sometimes I would talk to my student success guidance if there was like I couldn't get a hold of the counselor in the school or whatever, and there was an emergency. And I also started to kind of reach out to friends as well at this point, but not about necessarily everything serious or as often, but I was talking more open about my issues at this point. So yeah, going through grade 12, and then I've been in contact with the therapist who was outside of the school until like last week. So I've been pretty much doing weekly or bi-weekly therapy for the last, like I said, 3.5 years. And it's a really essential part of my self-care. It's either like preventative or reparative kind of thing. So being able to do it every week, it allows me to be preventative. So it allows me to cope with things before they get bad, or help me to not have things get that bad, because I'm able to kind of keep myself in check and work through things that are happening through talk therapy. And then also, you know, work through some things in the past as well sometimes. But yeah, so currently I'm looking for a therapist in the area because I've been having to do phone calls with my previous therapist because I moved for school. So I'm looking for a therapist in the area. Hopefully I'll start doing that again soon, because I think that'll really help me at the moment. But yeah, therapy has been incredibly instrumental in my recovery process, and it's been something that like I think everyone could benefit from, like at least going to a couple sessions, because it really does allow you to like have a space to really explore emotions, and also sometimes having a different perspective could make you realize things about your thought patterns and about the way you see yourself that you might not necessarily realize. And so I think it's a really valuable tool that I think people should try out. But yeah, so that's my experience with therapy. And yeah. All right.